Okay, today we're going to look at 1.1b and look at adding and subtracting fractions. So we learned last time about multiplying and dividing, and so remember this middle symbol is really important. That's going to tell you what process you have to follow. If it's multiplication, then you're going to cross cancel and then multiply across the top and the bottom. And if it's division, you're going to flip the second fraction and multiply, or flip and multiply. But now today you see we have pluses and minuses. So we're adding and subtracting. So when you add and subtract something, you can only add things that are alike. 3 apples plus 2 apples is 5 apples. You can add them together because they're alike. But you can't add things that are different. So 5 apples plus 2 oranges, I can't add apples and oranges unless I change the name I'm calling. I could say 3 apples plus 2 oranges, 5 pieces of fruit. So you have to come up with something that has both of those things in common, and really fractions are the same way. So when we look at this first one, I want you to think of this bottom number as being what you're counting. Here I have 7 15s, and I want to add 4 15s. Because I'm adding the same thing, I can just say 7 plus 4 is 11 15s. The denominator doesn't change because when you're adding something, apples plus apples is apples. It doesn't change when you're adding those numbers. So the denominator has to be the same in order to add, and it doesn't ever change. Once you've done it, the denominator stays the same when you're adding. So 2 things are happening here. When you're adding or subtracting, you have to have a common denominator, which means the denominator must be the same. The denominator is that bottom number, and if it's not, you do what we call change the fractions. So what do I mean by that? Let's look at this next one. Here I have 4 15s and I want to add 1 5. Well, 15s and 5s aren't the same thing, so I can't add them like they are. So I have to do what's called changing the fractions, and in order to do that, I need to find a common denominator. Now, a lot of people can look at 15 and 5 and know what the denominator is going to be 15, and if you see that, just go ahead and keep going. But if you don't know how to find the common denominator, in my opinion, the easiest way, because you can look at factors and you can make factor trees and all this, but I think the easiest way is what I call multiples. And so what I mean by that is my multiples of 15 mean that my first number is 15, the next multiple would be 30, and the next one would be 45, and so on. You're adding 15 each time. So the first one's 15, add another 15 would be 30, add another 15 would be 45. Or you can think of multiplying it. Multiplying by 2 is 30, multiplying it by 3 is 45. And then do the same thing with this one. This would be 5, 10, 15, 20. The first multiple that they have in common is your common denominator. They both have a 15, so that's going to be our common denominator. So we're going to change both of these fractions to have a bottom number or a denominator of 15 so that way we can add them. Now remember I talked about last time on all your work that you turn into me, your take-home quizzes, your test, all that, you've got to show me your steps. What I'm writing in red, you're thinking in your head, so you don't have to show that work right there. But anything I write in blue, you need to have on your paper in order to show me how you work through these problems. Okay, so now to change the fractions. So you're comparing 15 to 15. That did not change. Therefore, the top doesn't change. This 4 just comes down. But when I look at this other one, to get from 5 to 15, do you see I would need to multiply by 3 because 5 times 3 is 15. Or if you wrote your multiples, do you see that's the 1, 2, 3, the third multiple. So if I have to multiply the bottom by 3, I also have to do the top by 3. So I have to say 1 times 3 is 3. I changed that fraction. And it's the same fraction because do you see if we reduced it like we did last time, if we divided both of these by 3, we'd get right back to 1/5. So it's really an equal fraction. It's just not in simplest form. And so now the denominators are the same. 4 15s plus 3 15s is 7 15s. So again, to receive full credit on your take-home quizzes, you have to show me what's in blue. I need this fraction and then your answer. This one didn't have any work, so no problem. That's all you have to show on that one. But if I have to do work to get the answer, I want you to show the work on your worksheets. Okay, let's look at this next one. 5 6 and 2 9. Again, if you know what the common denominator is, just keep on going. But if you don't, what you want to do is go to your smaller number 6 and think, what are my multiples? My next multiple of 6 would be 12. My next one would be 18. And that's when I usually see, ooh, it's going to have a common denominator of 18. Because when you look at your multiples of 9, it's 9 and 18. So 18 is going to be our common denominator. Again, you can do all that in your head. You don't have to show me what's in red. But I do want to see this step. So we're going to change both of these denominators to be 18. So we have to change our fractions. So do you see, to get from 6 to 18, I'd need to multiply by 3. So I have to do the same thing to the top. 5 times 3 is 15. Whatever you have to multiply the bottom by, you have to do the same thing to the top. And then I'm going to compare 9 to 18. To get from 9 to 18, I need to multiply by 2, because you see it was the second multiple. So I have to do the same thing to the top. 2 times 2 is 4. So do you see, this is where I am really making a change. Once I pick the denominators, I'm really multiplying the top by that missing factor. Excuse me. And now I have 15 18s plus 4 18s is 19 18s. And again, you can leave it as that. It is an improper fraction. So you can always write 1 and 1/18, and that's perfectly okay. But I'm just going to let you leave it as an improper, because that's how we're going to deal with them later on when we look at algebraic fractions. Okay, these next two, what's different here is now it's subtraction. So you do addition and subtraction the same way, just at the end you're going to subtract instead of adding. So we're going to look at 5 6 minus 1/2. They're different denominators, so I have to find a common denominator. So again, if you know that that's 6, just keep on going. If you don't, we're going to look at the multiples. And again, it's always easier to start with your bottom number. Do you see your multiples of 2 are 2, 4, and 6? So what do they have in common? 6. So if you start with the smaller, sometimes you'll find it quicker. So we're going to change our denominators to be 6. Move this up a little bit. So we got to find out what we changed. Here, to get from 6 to 6, I didn't change, so I don't have to change the top. I can just bring down the 5. But for this one, to get from 2 to 6, do you see I multiplied by the third multiple? So I multiplied the bottom by 3. I have to multiply the top by 3. So I'm going to say 1 times 3 is 3. Again, what's in red is really what you're thinking in your head. You don't really have to show that. And now we have 5 6 minus 3 6 is 2 6. Now that's not completely wrong, but if you left it like that, you'd miss a point on a quiz or on a test, because it's not in simplest form. So 2 6 now needs to be reduced, like we did back in 1.1a, where we looked for what number would divide into the top and the bottom. And since both of these will divide by 2, I need to reduce that to be 1/3. So all your directions will always say fractions must be left in simplest form. And so that means if it can be reduced by anything, you need to reduce it. Okay, let's look at this last one, and this is the first one with kind of bigger numbers. Again, if you know what the common denominator for that is, go right ahead and work on, but it doesn't really jump out to me. So we're going to look at our multiples. Again, I always start with my smaller number. It doesn't really matter, but it helps you kind of find your what they have in common. So I'm going to look at my multiples of 12. 12, 24, 36. The whole time I'm looking at 16 thinking, uh-oh, what's going to work? 48. And that's the one that'll finally work, because my multiples of 16 are 16 plus 16 is 32, plus another 16 is 48. So my common denominator is 48. So I'm going to use that as my denominator. And now I'm going to change my fractions. So again, you're comparing 16 to 48. So to get from 16 to 48, you need to multiply by 3. So you have to do the same thing to the top. Since 16 times 3 is 48, I have to do 9 times 3 is 27. Then I look this way. To get from 12 to 48, I need to multiply by 4. Again, it's because it's the fourth multiple there. So I multiply the same by 4, making that a 20. And now 27 over 48 minus 20 over 48. I just subtract 27 minus 20 is 7 over 48. And again, you want to see, will 7 go into both of them to reduce it? And it won't, so that's your answer. So that's adding and subtracting fractions. It's all about that symbol and knowing what steps you have to do for those. So you're now ready for 1.1b practice problems.